If you've not been with us, or if like me you've slept, let me take a minute and catch you up to date on our present sermon series. When God created us, He created us perfectly. Perfect in body, perfect in mind, perfect in heart. But when we rebelled against Him, we corrupted ourselves in our beautiful world. No longer were we perfect in body. Cancer and corona came in. No longer were we perfect in mind. Depression and anxiety took root. No longer were we perfect in heart. Greed and lust and jealousy now wrestle for control. And in the same way that the poet spoke of sin as thorns that infect the ground, so every aspect of our universe was corrupted by the power of sin. And this includes our deepest internal hardwiring, what we call our instincts. Instincts are what we think when we're not thinking. It's how we react. It's the natural and typical way that we interact with our world. So far, we've considered some of these fallen and sin-influenced instincts, like store, the instinct to hoard and possess more and more for our protection. Strong, the instinct to never ask for help or need help from anyone else. Same, the instinct to surround ourselves with people like us and shun those that are different. Sure, the instinct to be confident in what we believe. Closed-minded, reject anything that's new or different. And each week we have identified some of the transformative and new Christ-influenced instincts that begin to appear within us as the Holy Spirit does its deep soul work. Store becomes generosity. Strong becomes willing to receive help. Sane becomes a love for others that are not like us. Sure becomes an open-mindedness to new possibilities and growth. This week we're going to talk about safe, the instinct to live a risk-free life at all and any cost. Like all those that we've discussed, there's nothing wrong at some level with the basis for these instincts. It's not more spiritual or nobler to want a life that's filled with trouble. It's okay to want to be safe. The problem is that we typically go to any lengths necessary to provide for our safety. Many times through this series, I've alluded to the work of Charles Darwin in his book On the Origin of Species in regards to the idea that the final step in transformation is a change of instinct. But today, let me point another idea out from his book, and this comes to us from page 64. Each lives by a struggle at some period of its life. That heavy destruction inevitably falls on either the young or the old during each generation or at recurrent intervals. Thus, it is our imperative to lighten the check and mitigate the destruction, if ever so little. There is the basis within us, this instinct that we call safe. We are biologically programmed to avoid struggle. It is our instinct to lighten any check and to mitigate any danger. Another writer from an earlier era exemplifies this human instinct and what happens when it runs its full eventual course. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche, and he said in his book, The Antichrist, well, what is good? Everything that heightens the feeling of power in man, the will to power, power itself. What's bad? Everything born of weakness. What's happiness? The feeling that power is growing, that resistance is overcome, that not contentedness, but more power, not peace, but war, not virtue, but fitness. The desire for us to feel safe and pursue our own survival leads us down a dark and dangerous path. Good becomes whatever makes me feel in control. Bad becomes whatever makes me feel out of control or weak. And happiness is having no resistance in anything we do. If we're driven by this kind of thinking, preserving self at all costs, controlling every circumstance, avoiding every potential danger, the end is a twisted existence of selfishness wherein others are nothing more than potential pleasures that we can derive from them or minions over which we can exert power and control. That's why this topic matters. That's why our instincts matter. Our human instinct wants to feel safe. And our new Christ-centered instinct wants something very, very different for us. To help us understand, let me go back and cover something that I know is very elementary, but it's important. It's called the idea of love. And there are three words that are inextricably interlocked: love, freedom, and risk. Love cannot exist without freedom. Freedom always opens the door for risk, and therefore risk is a necessary aspect of true love. Let me explain. In the book, The Four Views of Divine Providence, theologian Greg Boyd paints a picture that I would like to steal for this. I'll quote him. Let's imagine that a scientist created a microchip that could be implanted into a person's brain. And from the time that chip entered their neurons, they immediately acted and said and did whatever they were commanded to do. The scientist could control every individual expression, any amounts of loving sentiment, any loving actions, any loving words. Day after day, the individual could heap praise and adoration on the scientist and exhibit outward displays of love everywhere. But would it be real? Of course not. The individual is not acting with the parameters of his own volition, but from another. We can all look at that picture and realize that the scientist was not honestly loving because the person had no ability to choose love. And that's our second word, the word freedom. For there to be love, there has to be something chosen. One has to be free to choose to love or free to choose not to love. Forced to love is not love. Love requires freedom, and freedom opens the door to risk. Anytime I can choose something, it means I could have equally chosen something else. Just this week in school, Norman, who incidentally is the top third grader in his entire homeschool class, was learning about opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is all the things you did not choose when you made a choice. I go to the grocery store, I choose corn, therefore I did not choose green beans. With grocery shopping, this isn't risk, but the idea applied to other choices is. As a citizen aware of the laws, I can choose to follow the laws or I can choose to break the laws. The opportunity cost of following is that I did not break it, but I still have the freedom to choose to violate it or to follow it. And when you apply that to love, love has to be freedom denied or accepted. It can't be forced. The opportunity cost, what we call risk, is that love can be and often is rejected. Love requires freedom. Freedom involves risk, but our instinct is always to avoid risk, to be safe. So we avoid love. But Christ calls us to evolve, to change, to put it simply, to grow up. The evolution of this instinct from self-preserving risk to avoidance to intentional, courageous risk-taking has been thousands of years in the making. The instinct is avoid risk, keep potential dangers, preserve self. Everything has to stay away. And this instinct has to change if we're going to make room for love, because freedom and risk are part of the deal. So Jesus comes teaching a new law, a new instinct. No longer is it love those who love you to the extent that they already love you. In other words, don't risk more than other people have already shown they're willing to risk. No, Jesus says you love others as much as you love yourself. In fact, in Mark chapter 12 and Matthew 22, he says this is the second most important command after after love for God. So important is this command that James would call it in James chapter 2 and verse 8, Jesus' royal command. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's a pretty high standard. I don't know about you, but to quote Terrell Owens, I love me some me. To love someone as much as I love myself, that's a lot of love. And a lot of love involves a lot of freedom. They might not respond. A lot of freedom involves a lot of risk. They might reject me. They might hurt me. And that's what we're calling to is a far cry from Nietzsche's view, that people are just here for our pleasure or for our power. Jesus says people are here to be loved, even to the extent that we love ourselves. And this is very risky. But Jesus, in true Jesus fashion, raises the bar again to an unimaginable level. Have you noticed how often he does that? And Jesus says, you know better than to murder. I'm telling you, don't even be angry. You know not to cheat on your wife. I'm telling you, don't even sneak peeks at other women. You know better than to hate. I'm telling you, don't even call somebody a name. He's constantly just raising the bar. And he does here too. You and I already have an instinct to protect ourselves, to keep a distance from everyone else. Don't let anyone in close where they could hurt you. But I tell you, Jesus says, open your heart to the risk of rejection, even to the same level that you love yourself. But here it goes stratospheric high. Jesus takes it so, in fact, let's just do this. Let me just tell you how John records it in John 13. Jesus speaking, I'm giving you a new commandment, and it's this, love one another. Here the apostles are probably like, Jesus, we know this one. We know this. Love each other as much as we love ourselves. Apostles, shh, let him finish. They're always interrupting him. Shh, start over. I'm giving you a new commandment, Jesus says, and it is this, to love one another just as I have loved you, so you must love one another. So it's not the natural love. Love those who already love you to their extent. It's not even the royal law. Love others as much as you love yourself. No, this is the super duper over the top royal command. Love others as much as I love you. For God so loved the world that he gave his only beloved Son. Just as Jesus loved the church and gave himself for it. God, who did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us all. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. And this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Those are John 3:16, Ephesians 5:23, Romans 8:31, and 1 John 4:9 and 10, respectively. So you want to talk about love? You want to talk about freedom and risk? Love always involves freedom. Freedom always brings risk. And it is a great risk to love, but love is always worth the risk. God thought loving us was worth the risk. Shouldn't we embrace the risk of loving others? In the little convent in Calcutta, there once lived a wizened, old, bent-over woman named Teresa. She gave her life in service to others. She loved with a love that is as close to Christ's love as any love I've ever seen in my lifetime. On the wall of her little room hung a paper with words that she wrote, adapted from an earlier poem. And I think it speaks to the idea of what it means to live out this risky proposition of love. It was called Do It Anyway. People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives, but be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten tomorrow, but do good anyway. Give the best you have and it will never be enough, but give your best anyway. In the final analysis, it's between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. It's beautiful. Instinct says love is not worth the risk. The new instinct says love is always worth the risk. If you love, you will be hurt. Do it anyway. Jesus did it for you.